The war between humanity and the Vyre, a once peaceful alien race, had escalated beyond reason. The Vyre were relentless, their tactics merciless and calculated. For every victory humanity claimed, the Vyre exacted a brutal price. Cities burned, colonies were obliterated, and human life was lost in unimaginable numbers. Desperate and cornered, humanity turned to a weapon that had been under development in secret for years, a bioweapon called Eclipse. The weapon was designed as a last resort, a countermeasure to wipe out entire populations in a matter of hours, but with limited collateral damage. However, it was not without risk. Its effects were unpredictable, and the very essence of the weapon made it a moral quandary that the military had been unwilling to face until now. In their desperation, humanity deployed Eclipse on the Vyre capital city, a sprawling metropolis where their leadership was concentrated. What was supposed to be a tactical strike became a nightmare of unprecedented proportions. The weapon did not just decimate the city, it altered the very genetics of the Vyre. The biological agents in Eclipse didn't just kill, they warped the physiology of the Vyre, turning them into twisted, mutated versions of themselves. Entire generations were lost in seconds, and the surviving Vyre were left stranded, unable to rebuild. Their homeworld, once a thriving hub of culture and technology, was now a barren wasteland where no life could thrive. The initial report from Earth was that the attack had been a success. The military celebrated a brief victory, believing they had crippled the Vyre war machine. But the images of the devastated planet soon circulated throughout the galaxy, and the truth became clear. Humanity had committed an unspeakable atrocity. The death toll was far higher than anyone could have imagined, and the survivors were nothing but hollow shells of what they once were. No one had anticipated that the weapon would cause such devastation. The United Galactic Council, a governing body of the most advanced species across the stars, immediately called an emergency session. As ambassadors and leaders of various alien civilizations convened in the council chambers, the air was thick with outrage. The Vyre, with their once strong alliance with several galactic powers, had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with humanity's decision. The council's response was swift. Humanity would be held accountable for this crime. When the verdict came down, it was unanimous. Humanity was branded a war criminal species. The Council declared that Earth would be cut off from all trade routes, its representatives expelled from all galactic negotiations. The weapon would be studied, its knowledge locked away, and any further development of such weapons would be strictly prohibited. Humanity, once seen as a rising star in the galaxy, was now the galaxy's pariah. On Earth, the news was devastating. While the government tried to justify the use of Eclipse, claiming it was necessary to secure humanity's survival, the public reaction was torn. Some saw the move as a necessary evil, while others, like Captain Alana Voss, believed that their leaders had crossed a line that could never be undone. Voss, who had spent years fighting for peace in the galactic community, now found herself questioning everything she had fought for. In the days that followed, protests broke out across Earth. People marched, demanding answers, but also demanding a way forward. The damage was done. Humanity had inflicted an irreversible wound on itself, and the galaxy, in turn, had branded them forever. The future seemed grim. The stars, once a symbol of limitless possibility, now seemed cold and distant, an endless void in which humanity was no longer welcome. And yet, in the darkest moments, there were whispers. Whispers that perhaps the galaxy could be convinced to give humanity a second chance. But who would lead them down that path, and how? That, too, remained a question that the people of Earth were not yet ready to answer. The galaxy's response was swift, but its impact on Earth was far more devastating than anyone could have imagined. The United Galactic Council, UGC, once a hopeful ally of humanity, wasted no time in isolating Earth. A series of punitive measures were immediately enacted, strangling humanity's access to vital resources. Trade routes were severed, and all diplomatic channels were frozen. The UGC's decision was clear. Humanity had crossed a line, and there would be no turning back. As the blockade set in, Earth began to feel the weight of its own actions. Once a thriving hub of scientific discovery and interstellar trade, Earth's economy began to falter. Food, medicine, and energy sources became scarce. The sanctions, though aimed at political leaders, quickly trickled down to the common people. The average human, once part of a rapidly expanding civilization, now faced daily shortages and a growing sense of helplessness. The government, under immense pressure, struggled to maintain control. Tensions between factions erupted across Earth, with some calling for revenge, others for appeasement, and still others, like Captain Alana Voss, advocating for a long road to redemption. People who had once proudly worn the banner of intergalactic cooperation now felt isolated, abandoned by the very stars they had once hoped to join. On the streets, protests and riots became commonplace. The vast cities, once symbols of human progress, were now filled with cries of anger and despair. Protesters filled the squares, some condemning the government's actions, others calling for humanity to stand strong and never back down. But amid the chaos, there were those who saw a deeper truth. The war crime was not just an external judgment, it had torn humanity apart from within. A rising faction, the Crusaders, began to gain traction. They were a radical group of military leaders and civilians who believed that the only way to restore humanity's dignity was through revenge. They viewed the UGC's sanctions as a direct attack on humanity's very survival and called for a counteroffensive. In their eyes, the galaxy had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity's resilience, and they were determined to prove that mistake by any means necessary. The Crusaders' message was one of vengeance, and it resonated with a growing number of Earth's population, fueled by a mixture of shame, rage, and desperation. Meanwhile, factions like Voss reformists struggled to keep pace. Captain Voss, once a prominent negotiator and diplomat, now found herself in the uncomfortable position of trying to reason with a people who were torn between guilt and defiance. She spoke out, pleading for humanity to confront its past and atone for the crime that had been committed. But as the political landscape became more fractured, her voice was drowned out by those who only sought to perpetuate the cycle of violence. With resources dwindling, Earth's technological advances began to stagnate. Research stations went dark, and space exploration efforts were suspended as funding vanished. Even the once advanced space fleets were grounded, no longer able to operate effectively without the supplies and technologies they had relied on for centuries. The military, while still strong, was now without the power it once wielded, and Earth's defense systems were left in a state of disarray. International tensions on Earth were also rising. The government was divided into factions, one calling for negotiation, one for retaliation, and others caught somewhere in between. Global leaders could no longer maintain a united front, and the social fabric began to unravel. As the military was put on high alert to prevent a civil war from breaking out, Earth found itself in a delicate balancing act. Yet, it wasn't all bleak. A growing minority of Earth's population still believed there could be a way forward, an impossible road to reconciliation. There were whispers that the galaxy might offer humanity a chance for redemption. However, that chance would come at a steep price, and some believed humanity was too far gone to deserve it. In the face of this, a dark reality set in. Humanity had lost its place in the galaxy. The pride that had once marked the human race was now a distant memory, replaced by shame and fear. And no matter where Earth's leaders turned, one truth remained clear. The galaxy had passed its judgment, and the consequences of that judgment had only just begun. As the isolation of Earth deepened, Captain Alana Voss found herself at a crossroads. The UGC's judgment was harsh, and humanity's future seemed grim. But despite the isolation and the rising tensions on Earth, a flicker of hope remained. The Sheltar, an ancient and highly secretive alien race, had reached out to her. The Sheltar had remained neutral in all galactic conflicts for centuries, refusing to take sides in the war between the Fire and humanity. However, their sudden interest in Earth was both a mystery and a potential lifeline. Captain Voss, a seasoned diplomat, was chosen to represent humanity in the talks. She boarded a small, state-of-the-art starship, accompanied by a team of trusted advisors, and set course for the Sheltar homeworld. It was a journey into the unknown. The Sheltar were as enigmatic as they were ancient, with a culture that spanned millennia and a philosophy so complex that few could understand it. They were not known for engaging with other species unless it was absolutely necessary. And now, they were offering humanity an unexpected chance at redemption. Upon arrival, Voss was escorted to a colossal, floating citadel on the Sheltar homeworld, suspended high above a dark and stormy ocean. The air was thick with tension as she and her team were led through the citadel's vast, echoing halls. The Sheltar did not waste time with pleasantries. Their leader, the High Arbiter Lithar, an imposing figure cloaked in shimmering silver robes, addressed her immediately. "You have broken the balance of the galaxy, Captain Voss." Lithar's voice echoed in the chamber, cold and measured. "Humanity's actions have cast a shadow over the stars. The Vyor, a race that once stood as an ally, has been reduced to nothing. And for what? To gain a fleeting victory. To survive." Voss stood tall, refusing to flinch under the weight of the Sheltar's accusations. She understood the gravity of humanity's actions, but she also knew the stakes were too high to allow the galaxy to cast them aside forever. "We didn't choose to commit that atrocity lightly. We were pushed to the edge, and we made a decision. But we understand the consequences, and we are willing to atone." The Sheltar's gaze did not soften, but there was a flicker of something in Lithar's eyes, a recognition that the human race had the potential to change, if only they could prove it. The High Arbiter stood in silence for a long moment before speaking again. "We do not forgive lightly, and we do not forget easily. However, your willingness to face the consequences is the first step toward redemption. You will have our aid, Captain Voss. But know this, the price of forgiveness is steep, and it will not be easy. To earn back the trust of the galaxy, humanity must undergo an irreversible transformation. You must abandon the weapon that caused this destruction, dismantle your war machines, and prove that you are capable of peace." Voss nodded, knowing the challenge ahead. The Sheltar had agreed to help, but their support came with strict conditions. Humanity would have to prove its commitment to peace and disarmament, not just in words, but through action. This meant dismantling their military infrastructure, closing their war factories, and rethinking their very approach to conflict. The Sheltar were not asking for humanity's surrender. They were asking for something far harder. A complete reformation of human society, a break from the past, and a commitment to a future where war was no longer an option. It was a daunting prospect, and not everyone on Earth would agree with it. Back on Earth, the news of this unexpected alliance spread like wildfire. Some saw it as a glimmer of hope, a sign that humanity could yet redeem itself. Others, particularly the Crusaders, saw it as an insult, a sign of weakness. The Crusaders' leader, General Malik, declared that any human who chose to follow Voss's path would be branded a traitor. They argued that the galaxy would never accept humanity as equals again, and that the only way forward was to fight back, not to beg for mercy. As Earth was divided over its future, Voss understood the enormity of the task ahead. Her alliance with the Sheltar could either be humanity's saving grace or its final undoing. But there was no turning back now. She would have to unite her people, confront the past, and lead them into a future where the stars might once again shine brightly for Earth. The road to redemption would be long, but it had begun. While Captain Alana Voss and the reformists worked tirelessly to secure humanity's redemption through the Sheltar's guidance, there were those among Earth's population who viewed the path toward peace as a betrayal. The Crusaders, a faction of militarists and ultra-nationalists, saw Voss's efforts as weakness, a capitulation to the very species that had cast humanity aside. Their anger, fueled by humiliation and fear of complete annihilation, reached a boiling point when they launched a bold and devastating attack on a major galactic trade hub, the Denari Station. Denari Station was a hub of commerce and diplomacy, located on the borders of UGC space, and was considered one of the most crucial links between the galaxy's various factions. The Crusaders viewed it as a symbol of the UGC's dominance and a target for their retribution. They had acquired access to a stolen fleet of human warships, remnants of the old military, and led a coordinated strike against the station. The resulting attack was catastrophic. Hundreds of ships were destroyed, and thousands of innocent lives, human and alien alike, were lost in the chaos. The timing was deliberate. The Crusaders had known that the UGC was still in the process of deliberating humanity's fate after the war crime, and they aimed to provoke the galaxy into a response that would prove humanity's strength. Their message was clear. Humanity was not broken. They would not be humiliated or pacified. But the consequences of this betrayal were swift and brutal. The UGC was enraged by the attack, condemning the Crusaders' actions as a direct violation of the fragile ceasefire that had been established. The Sheltar, who had extended their hand in goodwill, were now withdrawing their support, their leaders remaining silent on the matter. The galaxy had already begun to lose hope that humanity could be redeemed, and this betrayal sealed humanity's fate in the eyes of the UGC. On Earth, the attack split the population further. Those who had once supported Captain Voss and the reformists now found themselves at odds with those who saw the Crusaders' actions as a necessary evil. In the wake of the Denari Station attack, violent clashes erupted across Earth between the factions. The government was paralyzed, unable to control the growing civil unrest, and the streets were filled with protesters calling for vengeance or surrender, but no clear path emerged. For Voss, the betrayal was a personal blow. She had worked relentlessly to maintain a fragile hope for humanity's redemption, and now her worst fears had been realized. Factions within her own species were determined to tear down any chance of reconciliation. Her attempts to reach out to the Crusaders, to understand their motivations, were met with disdain. They viewed her as a traitor, someone who had sold out humanity for the promise of peace that could never come. To them, the galaxy would never forgive humanity, and the only way forward was to fight, to remind the stars that Earth was still a force to be reckoned with. The situation grew direr as the UGC, once hesitant to escalate the conflict, now called for full-scale retaliation. The once imposing military fleets of the UGC gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system, ready to strike. Earth's forces, now disorganized and divided, were no match for the overwhelming might of the UGC. The threat of all-out war loomed larger than ever. In a desperate move, Voss sought a meeting with the Sheltar once again, hoping to salvage what little trust remained. She arrived alone on their homeworld, knowing that time was running out. As she stood before the High Arbiter Lithar, she laid her soul bare, explaining the internal turmoil that had torn humanity apart. "The Crusaders may have betrayed us," she said, her voice filled with pain. "But there are still those who believe we can change. We have the capacity for good, even if some refuse to see it." Lithar regarded her with an unreadable expression. "Your species is fractured, Captain Voss. Redemption is no simple thing. You are no longer just fighting the galaxy's condemnation. You are fighting yourselves. The path forward will require sacrifices that you may not be willing to make. Can you live with the consequences of your choices?" Voss felt the weight of his words, but there was no turning back. She had fought for peace her entire career, and she would not allow the Crusaders, or the galaxy, to determine her people's fate. She left the meeting with the grim realization that humanity's road to redemption would not be easy. It would take unity, conviction, and an unshakable will to overcome the darkness that threatened to engulf them. The stage was set. The galaxy was ready to descend upon Earth in retribution, but Captain Voss knew that, if humanity had any chance of survival, they would have to confront their internal divisions. The fight for redemption was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The fallout from the Crusaders' attack on Dennery Station rippled throughout the galaxy, leaving Earth teetering on the brink of total destruction. The United Galactic Council had already issued a final ultimatum to humanity. The UGC demanded complete disarmament and the dismantling of all military infrastructure, or they would unleash their forces in a decisive campaign to annihilate any remaining resistance. For Voss and the reformists, it was a dire crossroads. Either humanity would accept its penance and turn toward peace, or it would face total annihilation at the hands of a galactic alliance bent on erasing its existence. The atmosphere on Earth was fraught with tension. News of the UGC's final demand sent shockwaves through every nation, and panic spread like wildfire. The Crusaders, emboldened by their attack on Dennery Station, refused to accept the UGC's terms. Their leadership, led by the fanatic General Malik, saw this as a chance to rally humanity's spirit in defiance of the galaxy's demands. For them, this was no longer about justice. It was about survival, about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not bow to the will of alien overlords. Do not listen to Voss and her pacifists. Malik's voice boomed over the airwaves, rallying supporters across Earth. They would have us kneel before the galaxy's false sense of righteousness. We are humanity. We are meant to dominate the stars, not beg for forgiveness. We fight, and we will show them that Earth will never be subjugated. His words resonated with many. The human spirit, long celebrated for its resilience, now found itself caught in a fierce internal struggle. But the reformists, those who had stood behind Captain Voss, knew that humanity could not afford another war. Earth was on the verge of collapse. Food shortages, a crumbling economy, and internal divisions were already tearing society apart. A continued conflict would only ensure their extinction. Voss stood at the forefront of the resistance, knowing that the moment of decision had arrived. She addressed the people of Earth with a calm, determined voice, trying to appeal to their better nature. This is not about surrendering. This is about survival. This is about showing the galaxy that we can evolve, that we can make amends for our mistakes, and build a future where war is no longer the answer. But if we continue down this path of violence, there will be no future for us. There will be nothing but ashes. Her words, however, fell on deaf ears for many. Malik's supporters were loud and violent, taking to the streets, shouting for war. Protests turned into riots as factions clashed in every major city. The government was paralyzed by indecision, unable to act decisively without fearing the backlash from the growing militant faction. Amid the chaos, a secretive group within the military, the Phoenix Division, emerged. Led by former high-ranking officers who were once close to Voss, they began to gather support for one last strike against the UGC, a counteroffensive that could potentially turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. The Phoenix Division had the resources and manpower to mount an assault, but they lacked the public support and political legitimacy. Their plan, however, was already in motion, and their message was clear. The galaxy had taken humanity's will to survive and twisted it into a crime. They would rise again, no matter the cost. Voss, devastated by the fracturing of her world, knew that time was running out. The UGC's fleets were preparing to invade Earth's solar system, their resolve hardened by humanity's continued defiance. The Sheltar, once her only source of hope, had closed their doors. Even they could no longer afford to associate with a race that seemed intent on destroying itself. The weight of this reality bore down on her shoulders. The galaxy, once filled with possibilities, now seemed like an unyielding force determined to erase humanity from history. And yet Voss did not give up. Despite the growing factions against her, she reached out to the leaders of the other species in the UGC, desperately trying to broker one last chance for peace. She pleaded for a summit, a final dialogue to settle the fate of Earth. The UGC, however, was resolute. The damage had been done, and the galaxy could no longer afford to ignore the consequences of humanity's actions. The countdown to the final battle had begun. On Earth, Voss convened one last emergency meeting with the highest-ranking officials of Earth's fractured government. In a tense room, she presented a final plan, one that involved surrendering to the UGC's terms, but also one that could preserve humanity's dignity. Earth would disarm. They would dismantle their military, but they would also seek reparations for the damage caused, establish a global council to prevent future conflicts, and demand fair representation in the UGC. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Voss knew it was the only way to secure humanity's future. With the threat of total annihilation looming, there would be no other option. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and Voss was willing to sacrifice everything to ensure humanity's survival. The clock was ticking. With each passing hour, tensions escalated, both on Earth and in the distant reaches of the galaxy. As the United Galactic Council's fleets gathered at the edge of Earth's solar system, awaiting the final orders to strike, Captain Alana Voss was left with a soul-crushing decision: surrender to the UGC's demands or face annihilation. But Voss, despite the pressure, still held on to the slim hope that humanity could find a way out. If only they could come together in a moment of clarity. On Earth, the military divisions were on the verge of civil war. The Phoenix Division, now fully mobilized, prepared to launch their counteroffensive. They had gathered a formidable fleet, composed of the remnants of humanity's once proud military. Yet, in their eyes, this was no longer a fight for survival. It was a war for humanity's honor. A war to prove that they would not bend before alien powers, no matter the cost. Malik's words resonated with them. If the galaxy wants war, then let it come. We will show them that humanity can fight, and we will never be slaves. However, the cost of such a war was too great. The UGC's fleets were not just numerous, they were advanced in ways that humanity could barely comprehend. Their weapons, their tactics, humanity stood no chance. But the Phoenix Division believed their cause was just, even if it meant sacrificing everything. Meanwhile, Voss, isolated in her command center, struggled to maintain control over the situation. Her efforts to negotiate with the UGC had failed. The Sheltar, though still neutral, had distanced themselves further from the conflict, unwilling to intervene. And Earth's leaders, paralyzed by their own divisions, had made no move to offer any unified response. In a final attempt to prevent the looming bloodshed, Voss reached out to General Malik, the leader of the Phoenix Division. She knew it was a risk. Malik had never trusted her, and his disdain for diplomacy was well known. But she had to try, to remind him of what was at stake. The conversation was tense. Malik's voice crackled through the comms, his tone filled with contempt. "You would have us kneel, Captain. You would have us throw away everything we fought for, everything humanity stands for. What you're asking is impossible. The galaxy will never accept us, and we will never forgive ourselves if we do not fight." Voss's voice was steady, but there was a quiet desperation behind it. "I'm asking for survival, Malik, not surrender. The galaxy is ready to destroy us, and we're teetering on the brink of extinction. We need to make them see we can change. We need to show them we can evolve." But Malik was unwavering. "You think they'll spare us, Voss, after everything we've done, after Denari Station, after the lives we've taken? They will never let us go. We fight, or we die. And I will never allow humanity to die on its knees." The line went silent as the weight of his words hung in the air. Voss knew he was right, in a way. Humanity's past had been stained by violence, by war, and there was no easy path to redemption. But if they fought, if they chose to resist, Earth would burn, and the consequences would be far more devastating than any of them could imagine. With Malik's forces preparing to move, Voss had only one choice left. She had to act quickly to avoid total disaster. She made the decision to send a final, desperate plea to the UGC's high command, one that would offer the last shred of humanity's chance to survive. She requested a summit, a direct, face-to-face meeting with the UGC's leaders, where they would discuss one last possible solution: a solution that would require Earth to disarm completely, accept punishment for its crimes, and work to build a new future in cooperation with the galaxy. But there would be one condition. The UGC would allow Earth to maintain a seat at the table of galactic affairs. Humanity would be granted representation, not as a pariah, but as a species seeking redemption. Her message, sent via encrypted channels, was a long shot, an attempt to offer a lifeline in the face of certain death. The UGC, having lost all patience with humanity's defiance, were unlikely to respond favorably. But Voss could not stand by and watch her people tear each other apart, not without giving them every possible chance to survive. Back on Earth, the situation was deteriorating. General Malik's forces were on high alert, and the Phoenix Division's ships were ready for combat. In the streets, chaos reigned as the divides between pro-war and pro-peace factions reached a breaking point. Families were torn apart, friends became enemies, and the very future of humanity seemed to hang in the balance. Voss, isolated in her command center, sat at the edge of her desk, staring at the message she had sent to the UGC. Her heart raced as she waited for the reply. The stakes could not have been higher. Seconds turned into minutes, and then an unexpected signal. An encrypted message from the UGC's high command. The screen flickered to life, and the figure of Ambassador Xilori, the UGC representative, appeared. His alien face, stern and unreadable, filled the screen. He said only one thing. "Your message has been received, Captain Voss. The summit is set. But know this is your last chance. Succeed, or humanity's fate will be sealed." The ultimatum was clear. This would be humanity's final opportunity to redeem itself. The summit would decide whether Earth would survive, or whether the galaxy would make good on its promise to eradicate them once and for all. The summit was set to take place on the neutral ground of Votara Station, a vast, rotating platform located at the crossroads of UGC space. Votara Station had long been the site of delicate diplomatic negotiations between warring factions. It was a place where tensions could boil over, but also where fragile agreements could be forged in the shadow of war. Captain Alana Voss, accompanied by a small delegation of Earth's most trusted diplomats and advisors, made the journey to Votara Station in secrecy. Her heart pounded in her chest as the massive space station loomed ahead, its sleek design reflecting the cold, indifferent stars. She knew that the galaxy was watching closely, waiting to see whether humanity would crumble or rise to face its darkest hour. Upon arrival, Voss was ushered into a large, sterile conference room. Around the table, the representatives of the United Galactic Council sat. Alien species from across the galaxy, their faces stern and unreadable. The Council had representatives from the dominant species of the UGC, the Tenai, a reptilian race known for their cold logic, the Valkyrie, a species of energy beings whose every word seemed imbued with deep wisdom, and, of course, the Shaltar, whose leader Lithar had already made it clear that they no longer wished to involve themselves in humanity's fate. Ambassador Xilori, the UGC representative who had relayed the Council's decision, stood at the head of the table. His tall, spindly form towered over the others, his sharp features betraying no emotion. He spoke first, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo through the chamber. "Captain Voss, we have heard your plea. Humanity has proven itself capable of great destruction, but also perhaps capable of change. The Council has decided that this summit will be your final chance. You will answer for the crimes committed, and you will prove that your species can live among us without further bloodshed." The words hung in the air, like a heavy sentence waiting to be delivered. Voss, standing before the Council, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had worked for years to avoid this, the moment when humanity would be judged by the galaxy, when the consequences of their past actions would come home to roost. "I understand the gravity of the situation," Voss said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Humanity stands at the crossroads. We are ready to make amends for what has been done, but we cannot do it alone. We ask for the opportunity to prove that we can live in peace, not as subjugated creatures, but as equals. We do not seek to dominate the stars, only to find our place in them." Ambassador Xilori regarded her coldly. "Words are meaningless, Captain. We have seen the destruction your people have caused. Your war machines ravaged the galaxy, the Vyur, the Aderi, the countless innocents who lost their lives. How can we trust you?" A sharp silence followed, and for a moment, it seemed as though the summit might end in failure before it had even begun. But Voss refused to give in. She knew that humanity's future depended on this very moment. The Sheltar had withdrawn, and the UGC's patience had worn thin. This was the last chance, and she would take it, no matter the cost. "I ask you to look at us now," Voss said, her voice growing firmer. "Look at the faces of those who stand with me. These are the people who believe we can change. They've seen the horrors of war, and they're willing to walk away from it. We understand that redemption will not come easily. It will take time, trust, and most of all, action." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. The council members shifted in their seats, their eyes locked on her. For a long moment, no one spoke. It seemed as though the council was weighing the sincerity of her plea, balancing the potential for future peace against the cold reality of the galaxy's history. Then, a voice cut through the silence, a voice Voss had hoped to hear. Lithar, the Sheltar leader, who had remained silent up until this point, finally spoke. His deep, resonant voice echoed throughout the chamber, carrying a weight that demanded attention. "Humanity has the potential for great change," Lithar said, his tone neither kind nor harsh, simply a statement of fact. "But it is not enough to wish for peace. You must earn it, Captain Voss. The Sheltar have remained neutral for centuries, but I will not stand by and watch a species repeat the same mistakes over and over. Your people must demonstrate that you have learned the lessons of the past, and that you will not be tempted back into the darkness of war." Voss nodded, knowing that this was the crux of the matter. "We are willing to change, but we need your help. We will dismantle our weapons. We will offer reparations for the destruction we caused. But we need the UGC's support. We need to be allowed a chance to prove ourselves." Silori's gaze was unyielding as he looked at her. "We will see. You will be given 1 year. In that time, you must prove that humanity can live without war. You will work alongside the UGC to rebuild what was destroyed, and you will show that your species is capable of contributing to galactic peace. Fail, and Earth will be treated as a failed experiment." The council murmured in agreement. The final decision had been made. It was a delicate balance, a thread of hope hanging by a mere whisper. The next year would determine the future of humanity. Voss left the summit with a heavy heart. The galaxy had given her people a chance, a fragile, fleeting chance. But the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. And as she gazed out at the stars from the station's observation deck, she knew that the hardest battle was yet to come. 1 year. That was all the time humanity had to prove it could change, to show the galaxy that it was not the same war-hungry species it had once been. As Captain Alana Voss returned to Earth, the weight of the UGC's decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. The summit had granted humanity one final chance, but the consequences of failure were clear. If humanity failed to show its capacity for peace, Earth would face total isolation, and the UGC would enforce their judgment. The first few months after the summit were chaotic. The Phoenix Division, still determined to fight, refused to acknowledge the Council's decision. General Malik, despite the Council's ultimatum, continued to rally the militarists on Earth, arguing that the galaxy would never allow humanity to escape its past. "They'll never forgive us," he said, speaking to his supporters, "and they will make us their servants, their slaves. We cannot trust them." But Voss knew that in order to avoid annihilation, humanity had no choice but to change. She worked tirelessly to dismantle the remnants of Earth's military forces. The war machines that had once been humanity's pride were now decommissioned, and their technology was turned toward peaceful applications, space exploration. humanitarian efforts, and scientific advancement. The reparation funds were established, and resources were allocated to help rebuild what had been destroyed during the war. But the path to peace was not an easy one. Many humans, especially those in the militant factions, viewed the dismantling of their weapons as a betrayal, a sign of weakness. There were protests in every major city, sometimes turning violent. People were divided, unsure of whether humanity should fight for its honor or bow to the will of the galaxy. As Voss watched the chaos unfold, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the true test of humanity's strength. It wasn't just about weaponry or diplomacy. It was about the people themselves. Could they overcome their fear and pride? Could they learn to cooperate with a galaxy that had once turned its back on them? In the following months, Voss made several trips to the UGC's core worlds, working with diplomats and representatives from various species to begin the delicate process of rebuilding trust. She advocated for humanity's involvement in galactic initiatives, scientific collaborations, peacekeeping missions, and cultural exchanges. Slowly but surely, some of the UGC species began to warm to the idea that humanity could be a force for good, though others remained deeply skeptical. The Sheltar, who had remained neutral for most of the year, finally extended a gesture of goodwill. High Arbiter Lithar visited Earth, accompanied by a small delegation. His presence was a sign that, despite their misgivings, the Sheltar were willing to give humanity a chance to prove itself. The High Arbiter met with Voss in a quiet, private ceremony in the ruins of a former war zone, an area where the devastation from the war was still visible. "You have begun the hard work, Captain Voss," Lithar said, his voice heavy with an ancient wisdom. "But do not mistake progress for success. You have yet to convince the galaxy that you are worthy of trust. The road ahead will be filled with doubt and hardship, but you have the potential to change the course of your people's future." Voss bowed her head. "I know, Arbiter, but we are willing to fight, not with weapons, but with our actions. We will prove to the galaxy that we are capable of more than destruction." As the year drew to a close, the final test arrived. The UGC had set a deadline. At the end of the year, they would reconvene and review humanity's progress. The future of Earth rested on the outcome of this judgment. The Council would assess whether humanity had truly changed, or if it was still the same war-driven species that had once threatened to engulf the galaxy in flames. Voss and her team gathered in the UGC's headquarters, a sprawling station at the center of their political power. The council members were gathered again, and the weight of the moment was unbearable. It was now or never. Ambassador Xilori was the first to speak. "Captain Voss, humanity has had 1 year to demonstrate its willingness to change. We have seen progress. The dismantling of military forces, the reparations to those affected by your species' actions, the increasing cooperation with galactic initiatives. All of these have shown that humanity is, perhaps, on the path to redemption." Voss's heart raced, but she kept her composure. The road had been long, but it had brought them here. "We have taken the first steps, but we know that trust is earned, not given freely. Our work is far from over, and the challenges we face will only grow. But we are ready to prove that humanity can be a force for peace." The council members exchanged looks. The tension was palpable. Finally, Lithar spoke, his voice carrying a finality that cut through the room. "We have watched you, Captain Voss, and while it is clear that your species is struggling, it is also clear that you have made strides in the right direction. We will grant you another chance. Humanity will be allowed to join the UGC as a full member." There was a collective sigh of relief in the room, but Voss's work was not done. She had secured humanity's future, but the journey to true peace was only beginning. The galaxy had given them a chance, but it was up to humanity to prove that they deserved it. The scars of the past would take time to heal, but with every step forward, humanity would earn a place among the stars. Not as conquerors, but as equals. As Voss left the council chamber, she looked out at the stars beyond the window. The journey had been long and fraught with peril, but humanity had survived. And now, the real work began.